The coldest goodbye. The wind tore through the crumbling alleys of North Hollow like a grieving spirit, loud, invisible, relentless. It carried the sting of winter and the scent of old regrets, rattling broken shutters and whispering through cracks in the brick. Snowflakes drifted in restless spirals, catching in the rusted gutters and clinging to empty swings and forgotten playgrounds. On the edge of an abandoned apartment block, beneath the flicker of a dying streetlight, a lone figure stood wrapped in silence and sorrow. Her name was Elara Quinn. Once she had been full of fire, an EMT with sharp instincts and soft eyes. But the Elara who stood there now was faded, as though life had drained her in slow leaks. Her coat hung loose on her frail frame, soaked at the hem. Her lips trembled not only from the cold, but from a deeper wound, one carved by grief, hunger, and hopelessness. In her arms, wrapped in a frayed hospital blanket, lay her daughter. Barely a few weeks old, the infant let out a soft whimper, her tiny fists clenched near her face. Elara pressed her closer, but her limbs were numb. Her heart wasn't. Beside her stood Caro, a German shepherd with a grizzled coat and eyes that had seen too much. Once, he had been a search and rescue dog, famous in his circles, loyal beyond question. But now he was her only family. Once trained for disaster zones, he had found himself in one, hers. Elara knelt beside the old stairwell, her breath ragged in the frozen air. Her tears crystallized almost instantly on her cheeks. She leaned close to Caro, her voice nearly lost to the wind. "Watch her, Caro. Please. You're all she has now." Caro let out a quiet, mournful growl, nuzzling the baby gently. His body tensed, sensing what Elara was about to do. He moved closer, placing his weight against her side in protest. His eyes pleaded. But Elara had already made up her mind. She kissed her daughter's forehead, letting her lips linger for a moment too long. Then, slowly, painfully, she backed away, step by step, as if each retreat tore her soul apart. Caro followed her a few paces, then stopped, standing over the child protectively. Elara reached the alley's end, turned once to look back, her face twisted in silent agony. And then she vanished into the storm. Hours passed. Caro didn't move, not even when the wind screamed louder, not even when frost clung to his whiskers or when snow blanketed his back. He curled himself around the infant like a living shield, his thick fur pressed against her delicate skin, his breath a steady rhythm to keep her alive. The alley was silent, save for the occasional groan of distant traffic or the whistle of the wind through broken glass. The city slept, but Caro did not. He checked her breathing every few minutes, gently nuzzling her face with his cold nose. The child's chest rose and fell, fragile, uneven, but it rose. That was enough. Just before dawn, a distant growl began to rise, not animal, but mechanical. Motorcycles. A cluster of headlamps cut through the swirling snow. Tires skidded on ice. The engine stuttered to a halt at the edge of the alley. Jet was the first to dismount. He was broad-shouldered, bearded, and carried the weight of many regrets behind his tired eyes. His leather jacket was faded, his boots worn from too many roads. He wasn't just a biker. He was a wanderer, a man chasing redemption he never thought he'd find. He squinted into the shadows. What the hell? He motioned for the others to hold back as he approached cautiously. What he saw stopped him cold. A German shepherd, still as stone, wrapped tightly around a barely breathing infant. Snow covered them both like a blanket from heaven, or a shroud. Jet dropped to one knee, his breath catching in his chest. "Easy, boy. Easy. I'm here to help." Caro didn't flinch. He watched Jet carefully, judging every movement with precise intelligence. But as Jet extended his arms, Caro stepped aside, slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving the baby. As soon as the infant was in Jet's arms, Caro moved beside him and stayed there, brushing his body up against the child once more. Jet shouted over his shoulder, "Get the van. Within seconds, the baby was loaded into the back, Caro at her side. Jet climbed in too, holding the child as the others slammed the doors shut and roared off into the waking city. The van tore through icy streets as the first gray light of morning bowled into the skyline. Inside, warmth hadn't yet reached the vehicle's core, but the bundle in Jet's arms radiated something fierce and urgent, life, fading and fragile. "She's freezing," Jet said, voice strained, eyes locked on the baby's pale face. Her lips were nearly blue, her eyelids paper-thin. Caro sat beside him, his side pressed against the baby's blanket like he could will heat into her just by being close. The vehicle bounced through a pothole. No one in the back said a word. By the time they skidded to a halt outside St. Vincent's Hospital, the van's doors were already flung open. Jet ran through the automatic sliding doors, shouting, "We have a baby. Hypothermic. Urgent." Behind him, Caro burst through the entrance, his claws skittering on the tile. No one stopped him. A nurse, a quick-footed woman named Lauren, snapped into action. "Trauma Bay 3. She called, grabbing the baby and rushing her through swinging doors. Jet ran to keep up. Caro tried to follow, but paused just before the entrance, as though understanding this part of the battle wasn't his. He sat at the edge of the trauma room, unmoving, eyes locked on the window. Inside, it was chaos. Heated blankets, IV lines, warming pads. A doctor barked commands with a sharp edge. Severe hypothermia. BP's crashing. Pulse weak. Where the hell's her temperature? Lauren read from the monitor. 92. And dropping. They worked fast. Every second was precious. A respiratory therapist slid in a warming oxygen mask. Another nurse wrapped her arms to stimulate circulation. A third inserted a central line, her hands trembling. "She's malnourished," someone said. "Probably out there all night." Jet stood outside the glass, fists clenched at his sides. His eyes flicked down to Caro, who hadn't blinked. The dog was trembling now, not from fear, but from exhaustion, from cold, from holding still too long. Yet he refused to lie down. Inside, the machines beeped. Then, miraculously, a soft chime. Her heartbeat had steadied. "She's stabilizing," the lead doctor said, almost whispering, like he didn't want to scare the moment away. Outside, Jet exhaled. "She's alive," he whispered. Caro let out the quietest sound, part sigh, part whimper. Relief. Jet dropped to one knee and pressed his forehead gently to the dog's. "You kept her alive, buddy," he whispered. "You did the impossible." Later that morning, blue and red lights flashed outside the ER. Not in alarm, but in curiosity. A baby, found in an alley, wrapped in a dog's warmth, brought in by a biker with no ID. Detective Mara Leon stepped inside, her long trench coat still damp from sleet. She wasn't the kind of cop who believed every story, but something in Jet's eyes, something in the stillness of Caro, made her slow her usual skepticism. She crouched beside the shepherd, watching him watch the baby through the glass. "No chip?" she asked, after the vet scan came back clean. "No," the vet confirmed. "But this dog is trained. XK9, maybe. Military." Jet spoke quietly. He knew what to do, stayed with her all night, didn't move until we picked her up. Mara turned to him. "And you? How'd you find them?" "We were riding back from a food run. Snow started up again. I spotted something moving in the alley. Thought maybe it was a stray." He paused. "Wasn't." Mara gave him a long look, then nodded. "We'll need a statement. But first, maybe we can find out who left the baby there." Caro suddenly stood up and walked away from the trauma bay window. He headed toward the exit. Jet and Mara exchanged a glance and followed. Caro walked with steady steps, leading the patrol car through the maze of back streets and boarded-up buildings. His pace never slowed, not even when the snow deepened or the wind whipped harder. Jet sat in the front seat beside Detective Mara, watching the dog with growing awe. "He's tracking," Jet muttered. "He's remembering," Mara corrected quietly. Finally, Caro stopped in front of a sagging duplex. The door was ajar, swinging slightly. Peeling paint, shattered porch light, mail stuffed into the box from weeks ago. The place reeked of abandonment. Inside, it was cold and eerily still. Dust clung to forgotten surfaces. In one corner stood a crib, small, splintered, but intact. A half-empty bottle on the floor, a photo frame on a side table, face down. Near the crib, Caro sniffed the floor, then padded toward a narrow drawer. He scratched once, then sat. Mara opened the drawer and pulled out a torn envelope. Inside, a note, hastily scribbled, ink blurred by tears or melting snow. "I'm sorry. I tried so hard. But the world is louder than me and darker than I can survive. I have nothing left to give her, except the one friend who has never left me. Caro will protect her. He always does. Please, forgive me." Mara folded the note, her fingers slow and trembling. "She thought she was doing the right thing," she said softly. Jet knelt beside Caro, running a hand down his spine. "She trusted you with everything," he whispered. Caro didn't move. They found her an hour later, in the city park, beneath an old willow tree, sitting motionless on a snow-covered bench. Her name was Isla Dorn. Her cheeks were hollow, her coat threadbare. She looked up only when Mara approached. "Isla?" the detective asked. Isla blinked slowly. "Is she?" "She's alive," Mara said. "Thanks to your dog, and a man who saw what others didn't." Isla's shoulders caved, her hands covering her face. "I told him to stay," she whispered. "He didn't want me to leave. He tried to stop me." "Come with us," Jet said gently. Back at the hospital, Isla stood frozen at the glass window, staring in at her daughter, who now breathed peacefully in a warmer crib, monitored and safe. Caro sat just beside the crib, unmoving, as if guarding the space between life and whatever almost took her. When Isla entered, Caro rose. He didn't rush to her. He simply looked at her. And that look said everything. She crossed the room in slow steps and fell to her knees beside the crib. She didn't speak. There were no words left. Just tears and apologies and the softest, repeated whisper. "I'm here. I'm here." Jet stepped out into the hallway to give them space. He ran a hand through his hair and leaned against the cold hospital wall. That's when his eyes caught something. A familiar locket hanging from Isla's neck. It swung gently as she rocked forward over her daughter, and something about it struck him. He reached for his own pocket, pulled out a similar piece, long tucked away, opened it. 2 children, a faded photo. Same background, same faces. One of them was him. His breath caught. He turned slowly and looked through the glass. Isla. Isla was his sister, the sister he lost in the foster system years ago. Time didn't freeze. It flooded. Weeks passed. The snow melted. Spring crept in slowly over North Hollow. Jet bought an old fixer-upper on a quiet lane. Nothing grand, just solid walls, a backyard, and enough sunlight to promise better days. He didn't offer Isla a place. He handed her keys. "You and Mira," he said. "No more running." Her eyes filled, but this time not with sorrow. "You remembered her name," she whispered. "I never forgot," he replied. Caro had a soft bed by the window now. He never used it, still preferred to sleep beside the crib. But it was there. So was a new tag on his collar. Caro, guardian, brother, family. The neighborhood changed. Laughter returned. Every evening, Jet would stop by, never knocked, just came in with dinner, a new toy, or a story. Isla returned to nursing. Slowly, carefully, one shift at a time. Mira grew stronger. Her laugh rang like a bell. And Caro. He aged gracefully. He no longer needed to fight. His mission had ended the night he kept her warm. But his family had only just begun. And in the quiet moments, when the wind rustled the trees and the past felt far away, you could still find him there, watching over the home he helped save, the child he helped raise, and the sister he brought back from the edge of darkness.